Right, welcome everyone to our weekly call, kindly sponsored by DNS OR. So thank you to them for their support. As hopefully you saw with the call reminder, a sort of slight change of plan, which I'd sort of mentioned on our last call a couple of weeks ago, that in the event I didn't get the blockchain-based sort of naming system discussion sort of queued up properly, we would sort of revert this week to at least a brief discussion about the ITU study group 17 instead, which we are, as you can see from the screen, about to do. So just to confirm that, so we'll do a little bit of reflection on the sort of first part of the study group 17 meeting, ITU study group 17 meeting. I say first part because the meeting still is continuing into this week, so it's not finished yet. And then there's quite a few recent sort of news headlines, so we'll cover some of those, talk about some forthcoming events, etc. So that's the plan for the call. As you can see, a very fetching photo in the entry lobby of one of the three ITU meetings. And indeed, the first thing we will do, just responding to a comment in the chat from Alexei, is in the unlikely event you don't know what ITU study group 17 is, which to be fair, I wouldn't have known this myself until relatively recently. So the ITU has three main arms. The ITU-D, which looks at sort of developments, I think so more in IETF terms, analogous to the IRTF almost, so longest term stuff. The ITU-R, conversely, is the ITU's radio group, which looks at sort of radio frequency related stuff, amongst other things, probably a whole load of things as well, which I'm not aware of. And then ITU-T is the sort of standards part, which has got a number of study groups within it. I presume to begin with they were sequential, but over the years some have stopped, other ones have started, and the one focused specifically on security, I think slightly broader than just cybersecurity. So from something I found on the ITU's own website, it's focused on confidence, security and trust. So slightly broader than purely cybersecurity. Certainly sort of trust is a key part of that in the context of, as you can see, telecommunications, ICT, etc. So it's broadly analogous to the ITS security area, probably with apologies to both the ITU and ITF for a very imperfect comparator, but it's one part of ITU-T, which, as I say, very roughly speaking, is a bit like the IETF as an SDO. Kind of, and as I say, it has a number of live study groups, one of which is the security one. Not all of them are a direct sort of comparator with, for example, IETF one. So some can cover completely different things like numbering, but this one, as I say, roughly speaking, is a bit like the security area in some ways. Those of you that understand both of those things a lot better than me will probably be wincing at that, but I think for this is a reasonable comparison-ish. But it's not the same at all as the ITF in so many ways. So study group 17, I think this would be true, I'm confident of, the ITU generally is a lot more formal than the ITF. So quite a few suits. In fact, pretty much all the people are wearing suits or suit equivalents. A few people indeed wearing ties as well. So no sort of sandals, shorts and hoodies in evidence, at least not that I could see. It's rather more formal also in how the meetings are managed. So very much a case of you have to address the chair The use of mics, but that's mainly because of the acoustics in the room will be appalling otherwise. As you can sort of see from this photo, you've got sort of desk mics scattered liberally around this particular room that we happened to be in, but that was true of the other rooms that I saw in the few days I was there last week. A lot of reading stuff out loud in order to read documents into the record. In fact, quite often reading things at least twice, once to indicate that was the subject of discussion, then wait for any discussion, and then formally, even if there was no comments, then read it again to say that it was approved. So a lot more sort of formality in that sense, which is quite interesting. Conversely, again, I'm comparing this with probably the ITF as my main benchmark. The leadership team of study group 17 certainly has recently had a refresh, and there's been a deliberate diversity policy. So there's a lot of geographic diversity, both of the leadership team and attendees generally. But also gender. The leadership team was sort of, I think, evenly or roughly evenly split male and female, and a deliberate policy of looking for younger sort of leaders, at least in the more junior positions, as part of a succession planning process, which was good to see. I should say, just again answering one of the questions in the chat, which I hadn't thought of, the opening plenary and all of the working groups through the last week were all conducted only in English. In fact, Tom's answered that also in the chat. I think the closing plenary, there will be some language translation into other, simultaneous translation into other languages. And I think it was about a half dozen, roughly, languages, I believe. But also the written documentation is also made available in about half a dozen languages. Tom, did you want to come in on that?
More of just a sort of comparison again to IETF. You know, as you say, this is pay to play, but in a different way. So the member organisations pay in a kind of sub, whereas with the IETF, of course, you pay to go to the conference, and it feels kind of different because of that. In that at the IETF meetups, like, it seems that it's like, oh well, people have paid for this, and therefore we need to spend money on it. Like, there's free coffee, whereas at the ITU, there's coffee and you pay money for it, and you wouldn't feed it to a dog. But the use of funds in a different way, and it felt like it certainly felt like there wasn't much money around to do translation and to keep things up. But then again, unlike the IETF, which the meetings are held in a hotel, this is a set of buildings that they've got, and clearly that takes some upkeep and some things like that. So there's an element of faded grandeur about the place. So Alexi saying the UN influence waning, I don't know about that, but certainly it didn't feel like there was a whole load of cash rolling around the place.
Yeah, you know, those are all sort of fair comments, which I'll come back to at least one of those in a second. The other thing about formality, you'll see place names if you sort of look closely at the picture. There are a lot of country delegations with any upwards of one to probably a half dozen sort of people per delegation. But in addition to country delegations, there are also sector members, that's individual companies. Again, that may be one person or multiple people. And then in addition to those, there were invited technical experts, if you like, who are non-paying participants potentially. And some of us had the sort of privilege of going to some of the meeting last week in that capacity. So we weren't there under a country delegation or as a sort of sector member. And I think that was partly a deliberate effort by Arnaud Tadai, who some of you will know, who's the chair of Study Group 17, to try and get sort of potential new participants to come along, to sort of put a toe in the water, if you will, sample the event and potentially to become sector members or part of a country delegation in the future. As Tom said, though, it's pay to play in the sense that if you're a sector member, you have to pay a membership fee, and that varies by the size of the company, I believe, something to do with the turnover perhaps, or you become part of a country delegation, which I believe they also pay. But then obviously if you're a part of a country delegation, you have to take on board that country's policies. The sector member, so the technical experts don't pay anything to attend, I'm pleased to say, well, other than it's in Geneva, so you've got to fly there and stay in a not inexpensive accommodation potentially, and it's not the cheapest place in terms of living expenses either.
£10 a pint.
Yes, indeed. As Tom mentioned, though, the meeting was held in there's three office buildings that the ITU has within the centre of Geneva, one of which I think is past its date to be demolished and replaced with a newer building. I think that is now imminent. But nevertheless, it does have a dedicated facility that the study groups can use. I suspect in sort of days past, there would have been simultaneous translation throughout the duration of the meeting, but it's a cost-cutting measure, I think, to only do it in a much more targeted sense currently. Yeah, that's more restricted by budget, albeit the facilities are there, as you can see with those sort of mirror sort of looking windows. That's where the translators would sit to sort of during the meeting, were the booths being manned. Anyway, so very different feel to some of the other STOs, I believe. In terms of why we were there, so some of us went along. So the reason I was there, amongst others, was to talk about our PARCEP proposal. That's something we've also tabled at the IETF, albeit for slightly different reasons. So the IETF looking at the technical aspects, the ITU more the policy aspects, and this is a proposal to provide a sort of an interconnected parental controls between different sort of devices, applications, etc. So you don't have to sort of delve in the intricacies of every single application, platform, router, etc. to get it all working. Say within a home environment, you can do it once, and the settings then sort of spread across to the other connected services. So we took that into the ITU as a new proposal. So on day one, on Wednesday of last week, it was listed as one of a large number of potential incubation projects. So within, I think it was a couple of hours or so, maybe 3 hours, they went through, I think it was 50 or 60 potential incubation projects within the plenary session to agree where, if anywhere, they should be sort of placed, if assuming they had a place within study group 17 at all. PARCEP was sort of positioned tentatively within what was sort of called question 1 of work package 3. So work package 3, there were 4 work packages. That's just how they think of them, a bit like working groups in terms of how they sort of parcel up the work. And the sort of question 1 was one of 3 questions that work package 3 deals with. Again, that's a way of subdividing some of the sort of business, the sort of topics that are discussed. So again, just think of it as a way of packaging some of the work that appeared to have some related characteristics. the details of which don't really matter, to be honest. So anyway, on day 2 in the afternoon, so this is Thursday afternoon, the PARCEP came up amongst other things in discussion, and we took comments from various people that were in the room, including from the UK, South Korean, Lebanese and Russian delegations, amongst others. On day 3, some of us sort of made some time to make amendments to the text for review, which were reviewed over the weekend by the sort of study group chair, as well as we then had some additional feedback from the working or the work package or work party rapporteurs, and did some which led to some further fine tuning. And then this morning there was further discussion in WP3, and the sort of PARCEP proposal was accepted as a new work item, but with taking on board some additional comments from the Australian delegation to be clear of the distinction of any work undertaken within the ITU versus any that might in future be undertaken within the ITF, should that also decide on, see, got a typo there, to also take on a sort of PARCEP to do some protocol development work, which will be something in the future. So the reason I mention that is because we did the equivalent of a dispatch question on day 1 blending into day 2, then almost a BOF in sort of day 2 and 4, and then it's been sort of taken on formally, so almost accepted as a new working group. As I say, it's an imperfect comparator, but despite the relatively rigid sort of formality, dare I say, in some ways it was pretty efficient as well, in terms of, yeah, given that there were a whole load of other new work items that were taken on board along the way as well. So although it was sort of very different culturally, it was interesting to see something sort of, in the space of 4 working days, elapsed time that it took to have something adopted on the agenda of Study Group 17 for future formal work. That isn't to say it'd be an easy path from this point on, but that I found an interesting learning. So despite the formality, it seemed to cut through a lot of work pretty efficiently. Let me pause there, and just on the off chance anyone might have any questions or sort of clarifications or other or observations, perhaps relative to other SDOs as well. I don't know if anyone else has had any experience of the ITU, good or bad, that would wish to interject, in which case feel free to do so now if you wish. Pause for a second, otherwise I will move on. Not looking like it. Okay. Oh, and I should say, so I thought I had this. Just a few more pictures, and you'll see I also took the opportunity to do a day trip on Saturday to CERN, just on the outskirts of Geneva, which has got the delightfully named Big Bang Cafe. Why not? If you recall, back in the day, before the particle accelerator was fired up, there was sort of rumours that it would lead to a big bang as soon as it went live. So obviously a bit of gallows humour in their naming strategy. You'll also see, if you've ever been to Geneva, the very big fountain on the lake. There's Gianpaolo and Tom sampling the delights of the Ethiopian coffee bar, just around the corner from the ITU building, which serves some extremely pleasant coffee, some of which had Ethiopian spices in it if you wished, and then some of us taking advantage of the Swiss cuisine, including a Swiss fondue, as you can see. You'll clearly see that I'm not there demonstrating any of the diversity of age, gender, or indeed geography in that picture. So apologies, but you just have to trust me that there was plenty of diversity present, albeit not on show there.
And just worth mentioning Mr. Tadai there in that picture, on the right hand side, being he's got to be one of the hardest working blokes in the standards world. That guy never gives up, does he?
Yes, yeah, it has to say, yeah, Arno's work ethic is quite impressive. Given he was working through the weekend on the admin so that things then ran smoothly into the Monday. So there wasn't any sort of official business on Saturday or Sunday, but I think there was a lot of work happening in the background with the Secretariat to ensure that the updated documents were available for Monday. And obviously there was a lot of, as Sunday Group Chair, a lot of sort of behind the scenes networking happening as well with the various country delegations. A lot of sort of soft diplomacy behind the scenes, so, which is all very impressive to see. Okay, all right. Well, that's it was interesting, and based on that, I'm sort of buoyed with that. Although I've attended some ICANN meetings remotely, I have now signed up to attend the next ICANN meeting in person in Mumbai in the new year. I'm sure Michael will be thrilled with that, amongst others. Right, let's move on to recent developments, of which there were many. So I'll just pull out some of the more interesting ones to me, just for your information. So first one, there've been a number of sort of things in the news, sort of discussions about sort of DNS sort of mandated DNS blocking, sort of content blocking, using the DNS as a point of control. Largely for the enforcement of rights of rights holders on content. You may recall the sort of, I think a year or so ago, Quad9's dealings in the German court system with Sony Music, and more recently the Piracy Shield initiative in Italy, to sort of brought about by the rights holders of sort of football content. So last week, the US Supreme Court sort of heard the oral arguments of Cox Communications versus Sony, again to do with the alleged infringement of Sony's rights. And arguments whether there should be liability on the sort of resolvers or ISPs in this instance. So the link is to a recording of those oral arguments. So for those of you that may have an interest in the policy aspects, you can listen to those and make your own, sort of draw your own conclusions. What I have done is I had a conversation earlier on today with Simon Forster, who was on the call briefly. Looks like he's dropped off. So Simon is the general manager of Quad9, and we sort of penciled in that we're going to have a discussion about sort of mandated DNS blocking in the new year, probably the end of January. I think the date is. I'll come on to that towards the end of the call. So we'll revisit that topic. Who knows? By then we may have had a ruling from the US Supreme Court, or maybe we won't. So we'll find out. And I can see Ross has helpfully put additional link in the chat, which I'll include with the notes as well. Okay, secondly, interesting article on the adoption of ECH, encrypted client hello. So Colm Healy of Karata, which is an Irish cybersecurity company, has written about the take-up of ECH and just sort of discuss some of the risks that ECH poses for enterprise cybersecurity. And just one thing from that, but based on the Karata's traffic analysis, slightly fewer than 10% of the top million websites support ECH, but just about 0.06% of connections are actually using it. You may recall that both the server and the endpoint have to be supporting ECH for the connection to take advantage of that capability. So anyway, interesting data there in that article, and sort of coincidentally, also Cisco published a piece on ECH. Perhaps give me a little bit more an explanation about what it is and its capabilities, just by way of background, if you've not been following that, as I'm going on to talk about a tool that they have, which provides a degree of visibility of traffic that's been encoded using ECH protocol. If you're interested in ECH, you'll no doubt find that of interest as well. And then a bunch of other things. I won't go through all of these. As you can see from Akamai on misconfigurations using of the DNS and how that impacts on firewalls, and a really interesting piece actually from Infobox from the threat intelligence team, which continues to deliver really impressive work. This time on an advanced phishing adversary in the middle framework that they've sort of found by doing some DNS analysis inevitably. I'm not sure there's so much in some of the other stuff, so let's just see. Bottom of the screen, perhaps. The NANOG 95 meeting took place at late October, I think it was, in Texas. Jeff Houston from APNIC sort of written up some of the more interesting presentations from there, as you can see, covering anything from the sort of US telephone system in the 1980s through to quantum computing and a whole host of other stuff in between. So if you want to do a sort of quick catch up with some of the stuff from NANOG 95, Jeff's article is probably the place to go to. That's probably the most interesting things from the headlines. So I'll just roll over these. Then loads of other stuff that caught my eye from the last week. The advantage of having some plane rides and time in an airport lounge to peruse stuff. So apologies for that, but various things both on the policy side and some more technical stuff, which I'll leave you to review also at your leisure. See if there's anything there that's of interest to you. See in the chat that Alexei has asked if anyone wants to come to the next nog.fi, so that's the Finnish nog in June of 2026 to talk about ECH. So anyone would like to put a comment in the chat. Depending on dates, I'd certainly be happy to be part of that, Alexei. I'm sure there are others as well that could certainly do that. So let's sort of check diaries. I'll make sure I got the date for that nog, and I'll add that to our events list if it's not already in there, which I don't think it is. Yes, in terms of the sort of deadlines coming up, I see I evidently haven't updated this slide. I do apologise. So the first two have already gone. I missed this when I was updating the slides, but perhaps usefully, RIPE 92 and RIPE 93 fellowships. So this is some funding that's available to attend RIPE 92, 93. Sort of details in the link on the slide. Deadline to apply for either of those is the 10th of December. So you do have a couple more days to put your application in if you haven't already done so. Also, the Internet Society trustee nominations deadline for that is the end of this week, 12th of December. So that's also coming up quite soon. And I think the final one that's imminent is the EU's multi-stakeholder forum on internet standards deployment. This is principally intended to provide guidance on relevant sort of best practice documents this is finding them, not writing them, to help with compliance with the NIS2 deadlines. That was the main focus for this particular multi-stakeholder forum, as I understand it. So if you would like to be part of that, either I think as an individual or an organisation, the deadline to apply is again this Friday. You may recall that Rudiger Martin from the European Commission came to the last ITF, so last but one ITF meeting, and did a presentation on this in one of the side meetings. And similarly, I think he also came to the last but one right meeting in Lisbon and also gave a presentation. So it's that body that this deadline, the 12th of December, applies to. And Vicky put in the chat that quite a few DNS people have applied as individuals to be technical advisors to the NIS2 update, which is excellent to see. So there you are. So if that's of interest and you haven't already applied, you got to the end of this week, click on the link and there's an application sort of form to fill out. Okay, in terms of forthcoming events, well, I've talked about the ITU Study Group 17. I mentioned that, and that continues through to the 11th. It is a sort of multi-day, as you can see, 11th, so I think 8 days of actual sort of business within that. So that continues through most of this week. Also on Thursday morning, roughly every 4 months, the EU's, so this is the Commission's high-level group on internet governance, is meeting. It's a mainly remote meeting. I think the Secretariat tend to all be present in Brussels, I think possibly plus member state participants, but individual participants all tend to be remote now. And also on the 11th, you'll see in London, the UK IGF meeting is taking place. That's an all-day meeting, in person or remote, in London. And I think you can still register for that, either to attend in person or remotely, as you wish. Okay, and then plenty of other stuff coming up. But as far as I know, after that, everything that I'm aware of really takes place in the new year. So that'll be certainly my last bit of travelling will be to sort of join the HLIG and the IGF meetings on Thursday. Then that's my travelling done until the new year, which is marvellous. Okay, but despite travelling not continuing, you'll see we will be meeting next Monday to talk about discovering the discovery of designated resolvers, which we sort of touched on a few months ago now, potentially. So we'll touch on that shortly. So, Gianpaolo, sorry, I just noticed your hand is raised. Hopefully you haven't missed that from a while ago, but apologies if
Yeah, it was on ECH topic. It will be the topic of call of the 19th of January. And I presented at IETF a draft to discuss the privacy and centralization gaps of ECH and in general CDN. And I've also presented it at ITU. Being ITU different and similarly to PARCEP, I had to remove all the recommendation for protocol, but then it has been think that is valuable, and so it will progress as an ITU as recommendation, while the protocol parts will be needed by IETF.
Yes, yeah. Apologies. I should have mentioned that. That was the other reason why some of us were in Geneva. Apologies for my oversight on that, Gianpaolo. So yes, so positive progress on both of those, which is marvellous. Yeah, and you're gonna talk about that on the 19th of January on this call, of course, which would be good to hear. Yeah, so on the 15th, discovering the discovery of designated resolvers, and then on the 22nd, Peter Lowe will be joining the call with an updated version of his presentation on towers from the block list. So you'll recall for many years now, I think for a couple of decades, possibly longer, Peter has been sort of maintaining his own block list, and he'll share some of the adventures he's had with that. I think reprising a presentation he gave in Nicosia at the Agard's an event Agard hosted a month or so ago, but duly updated. So if you heard it then, there'll be a few additions, and that'll be the last call. Lots of our calls until the beginning of January, when you'll see I've sort of penciled in, subject confirmation, the potentially removed date for our discussion against blockchain, case for and against blockchain-based naming systems, postponed from today. So I'll let you know before then whether that's firmed up or not. And you'll see on the 26th, as I mentioned earlier, that sort of tentatively the mandated use of the DNS for content blocking with Simon Forster of Quad9 and potentially others, just sort of discussing that. And then, as always, we'll open that up for a wider discussion amongst anyone else that's on the call. A question in the chat, Ross, I think that was related to the that standards sort of advisory group, expert group that the European Commission setting up. The application, you asked where was the application, so let me just briefly scroll back. So the multi-stakeholder forum, if you click on that link, use that URL, then that's how you apply to become those advisors. So
okay, thanks.
And it's still open, so you've got till Friday to do that. And I don't think there was any need to be an EU citizen or anything like that that I recall from sort of just skimming through the pro formas. So I think it's pretty much open to anyone to apply. Yes, Alexei.
Does it involve travel?
I honestly don't know. Anyone else on the call happen to know that? Or whether the meetings are remote? I'm pretty sure it doesn't involve funding, because I asked that question in the side meeting, at the ITF meeting in Madrid, and it didn't sound like there was any funding available. So I think it's self-funded by the participants as far as I'm aware, but I'm not sure whether you have to do it in person or can do it remotely. It might be a bit clearer on the application form, so maybe click through on that to take a look if you're interested.
Roger.
Okay, right, let me just skip back. So I think that was just sort of topics that we got penciled in so far through to the end of January. So already all the way through the first month of next year. And that was everything I need to cover, other than, again, to say thank you to our sponsors. But let me stop sharing at that point. So, and see, is there anything that's on anyone else's minds at the moment? Anything you'd like to come in on? Not necessarily that we've just covered, anything that you've seen from the last week or so that you think is noteworthy. So if so, feel free to jump in and share. Or put it in the chat if that's easier, and I'll pause for a moment to see if there is. I don't know if sort of both Tom and Gianpaolo were also in Geneva, if there's anything that either of you want to add on that that you think I've missed, it's noteworthy, that hasn't already come up. Nope. Yeah,
Just final, sorry. Just fine. It was very interesting to see how member states were appreciating this work, and was a strong difference respect IETF, where it is seen probably as a danger for the application. So different interest working in different levels.
yes. Yeah, it felt very different. Pros and cons in both approaches, I think. But yeah, it was certainly interesting to go to as a sort of a ITU tourist. But yeah, based on our improbable success with the two documents, looks like we'll be back in early April for the next round of
Content week.
So yes, indeed. Yeah, yeah, interesting few days, certainly. Okay, all right. Well, look, let's draw a line there. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. I hope that was useful. Little insight into the ITU, which was certainly fun for some of us last week. But have a fantastic week, and look forward to catching up next week when we talk about the discovery of designated resolvers. So see you all then. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a good week. Bye.
Bye.